Hi everybody, Mike Beer here. We have Thursday's DRF race of the day, Belmont Park for the race of the day on Thursday. Race number 7, an allowance optional claiming event, sprinting 7 furlongs on the main track. Only a field of 6 for your Wednesday race of the day, and it's headlined by a very, very, very heavy favorite from the Chad Brown barn. Here's your field of 6, and you can see there drawn to the far outside post. Number 6, Goodnight Olive, 2-5 on the morning line. Just only 3 starts so far for this filly. A couple of really impressive wins in her final 2 starts last year as a 3-year-old, and just an absolute standout based on those 2 races. She is off of a layoff here, so she's going to have that to deal with. But man, it's hard to envision her landing in a better spot than this one, just to kick off her campaign here as a 4-year-old. Just a real standout in this race. Before we get into the handicapping, just a reminder, you can scan that QR code you see on your screen right now, and you can access the PPs for this race on your mobile device. The formulator PPs will also be available on the race of the event page at DRF.com. I don't know how much we're going to have to really talk about here for the Thursday race of the day. Let's put the Timeform US pace projector up there, as if Goodnight Olive needed any advantages in here. She looks like the lone speed in a situation that Timeform US anyway feels like is going to favor horses on or near the early lead. This filly is plenty fast early, and those 2 wins to close out her 3-year-old campaign there. Those back-to-back wins, one at Keeneland, one at Aqueduct. They didn't go to the lead, but they could have gone to the lead with her in either one of those races, because she's a really good gate horse. She broke very well from the gate, but they just were content to take a hold, track some other horses in there, and then she just won as she pleased both times. Maybe they'll just go to the front with her in here. There's really no need to play too many games with her, and it's not like there's a bunch of blazers to her inside. We'll see how they decide to play it. Doesn't feel like Trip is really going to make that much of a difference for Goodnight Olive in this race. Honey Money, the horse down on the rail, there's really nothing to knock about her. She's an 8-time winner, a New York bred, a really, really good one. And she just, is one of those horses who you can really rely on. She just shows up and she runs every time. She's won 2 of her last 3 starts. The races aren't fast. She's never byred out of the 70s so far in her 24 race career. And obviously just, running her typical figure in this race is not going to get it done unless the favorite fails to show up at all. But you know that this filly's just going to be there for you. She's going to show up. She's going to run her race. The 7 furlongs is no problem for her. She has fine tactical speed. She handles the surface, whether it's fast or wet. It doesn't really matter to Honey Money. She shows up. She runs every time. Really reliable, really consistent. Certainly a horse that could win this race, or could at least be a factor. I don't think she's going to beat the favorite in here, if the favorite shows up with her good race. But you have to really respect Honey Money, and they're just going to run her in the next logical spot off of the N1X win in her most recent race. The number 2, Betsy Blue, another New York bred in this field. She's 6 for 13 in her career. 11 of those 13 starts she's been in the exacta. Another one who's never run a particularly fast race, but tends to show up and run every time. 2 starts back, I'm not really sure what the excuse was for her that day. It's really the only time in her career where she really just failed to show up with much of anything. She was 2-5 that day in this condition, right off of an N1X win back in March, and she just didn't run well at all in that race. 2 starts back. Never really made an impact on that race. Sat off the pace as she usually does, but was working hard through the turn in that race. You could tell that she was just sort of struggling to keep up, and then she didn't really fire through the stretch. She did bounce back with a little bit of a better performance in her most recent start. She was only second best that day to a stablemate of hers, Foret, who got to the front in that race and just never really looked back. Betsy Blue did find good trip towards the inside, only second best in there, but at least it was a bounce back effort for her. She could certainly, get a piece of this race, although based on what she's done so far, she's probably not beating the favorite. Halo City is the 330-1 on the morning line, exits the same race as Betsy Blue in this condition, which she's tried a couple of times in the past to no avail. Listen, I got another horse who's just a little too slow to win this race. She ran fine last time, and again, a race that was wired by Foret. I don't know, she was away last from the gate in there, outrun up the backstretch in that race, pretty far back there actually, fanned widest to the stretch. She raced on pretty well in there, never a threat to win it. Wasn't, really that close to Betsy Blue, who wound up finishing second, but she almost got third in that race. Not a terrible performance, but not one that's going to make you want to bet her back against this field. Amelia's Moon, I feel like if you're going to if you feel like taking a shot against the favorite in this race, maybe you're going to do it with Amelia's Moon. She's been a little bit of an in and outer since she got here from Peru. Only 3 starts in her native Peru, but one of those was a Group 1 win going the mile. Didn't run well off the layoff. They debuted, her stateside debut came at Saratoga, sprinting on a sloppy track, and she didn't run well that day, but she did bounce back, I thought, with 2 better performances in her next 2 starts. She didn't win either of them. She wound up settling for 3rd both times, but she ran better in those races. An 84 buyer going this distance at Saratoga in her 2nd stateside start for Belmont. Ran okay. She still hasn't won a race since she's arrived stateside, but she did run a couple of good ones, in the middle there last year. Her most recent start at Aqueduct was not a good performance. So, and obviously she went to the sidelines after that. She's been away for, over 6 months now. So we'll see. She ships back in. She's going to start out now as a 6-year-old for a new trainer, a trainer who has shipped in some pretty live horses here. I don't know. There are things to like about this horse. I feel like if you were going to try to beat the favorite, maybe you would do it with her just because she's so much more of a wild card than everybody else. But it's still, pretty hard to make her in this race. She's going to need a career best performance to win. Customer Experience is the 5. There's nothing wrong with her. She looks a lot like some of the other horses we've already talked about in here. You kind of know what you're going to get from her. She's pretty consistent overall. She has the 93 Buyer's Beater. If you go back to her first start of 2022 back in January in a 32 claimer going a mile at Aqueduct, 93 buyer winning that race. And it did come at a time when she was in really good form. It was a 3rd win for her in a 4-race span. And just a pretty big step forward in that race. She had looked good winning the prior 2 races as well. And then she won that one pretty easily. She came out of it to step up to this condition and didn't run poorly at all. Had to settle for 4th that day. She wasn't good enough to beat that field going a mile on a muddy track. But she ran fine in that race. It wasn't a bad performance. It does feel like she's sort of maybe tailed off since then, though. The race 3 starts back when Honey Money beat her. There's just no excuse for Customer Experience that day. It was on a wet sealed track, but she got a great trip. She took a run at Honey Money in there and actually looked like in the stretch maybe got as much as a full length in front of her as they came through the upper stretch in that race, but she could not put that race away and then didn't finish well at all. Let Honey Money come back, and Honey Money actually beat her pretty easily at the end of that race. I didn't like that performance. I don't love her 2 performances since then. Maybe she got back on track a little bit last time while only 3rd best to favorite Easy to Bless. That was over another wet track. I don't know. She's run a couple of good races. That 93 buyer is a little bit hard to get behind that she earned back in January. She's a horse who I guess you could make a case that she's the 2nd most likely winner in here in a lot of ways. I just don't really love her recent form. Let's go to the morning line favorite, the heavy morning line favorite, and weigh the horse to beat in here. Good Night Olive. Only 3 starts so far. Run well in all of them, including 2 blowout wins in her 2 most recent starts. The final 2 starts last year as a 3-year-old. We'll take a look at the 2nd of those. This was at Aqueduct going this furlong distance. Again, she was 1-5 in here. She broke really well from the gate, but they didn't go to the lead with her. They let 2 long shots move up to the inside to take over. Good Night Olive was fine with that. Irad just let her cruise up to those horses throughout on the turn. You can see through the stretch. He just shook her up, just a little bit in the stretch, and she settled things very quickly in there, ridden out to the finish. Very easy win, 87 buyer. She earned a 93. Breaking her maiden by the length of the stretch at Keeneland. Either one of those 2 starts just makes her way too much for this field. You have the layoff to deal with at a very short price. Maybe that's enough to get you to want to try to beat this horse. I couldn't do it. I just feel like Good Night Olive has found the perfect spot to return in, and there's a chance that there's really still a chance that she turns out to be pretty good. I mean, she's been very impressive winning her last 2 starts. She's 2-5. I'm not trying to beat her in this race. I went 6-2-4 for my top 3 picks in this race. I put Betsy Blue 2nd, just thinking that maybe she would sit a little bit and then try to rally past anybody who did any chasing of Good Night Olive early in this race. 6-2 for me. In the Thursday race of the day, it's Belmont Park. It's race number 7. Twilight card there Thursday, so they don't start till 3:05. The race of the day, race number 7. Approximate post time is 6:15 Eastern time. Good luck.